Thanks for joining us. I'm Kim Christensen.
I'm Kyle Clark. The landlord who owns troubled apartment complexes in Aurora at the center of claims about migrant gangs is now fighting legal action from state prosecutors.
CBZ Management is suing the AG's office. 9 News reporter Ria Jha is here to explain.
Yeah, CBZ Management is that same owner of the 2 apartment complexes deemed uninhabitable earlier this year by the city of Aurora. Now in that lawsuit that they filed, they're saying the Attorney General's investigation could cause irreparable harm to their tenants. CBZ Management, the company that owns several troubled apartment complexes in Aurora, is taking the AG's office to court.
It appears to me that they are throwing a laundry list of ways in front of the court to not provide this information.
In response to Colorado's Democratic Attorney General's investigation into their business, CBZ Management filed a lawsuit essentially saying, "You're asking for too much." Civil rights attorney Kylie Schmidt explains the AG's office has the power to ask questions.
The Colorado Consumer Protection Act is one of those laws that gives the Attorney General's office authority to issue requests to parties for information.
The AG launched an investigation in September into whether CBZ Management was violating the state's safe housing and consumer protection laws. Documents previously obtained by 9 News show there have been questions about habitability and cleanliness at the apartment complexes for years. The AG's office issued a nearly 300-page subpoena to the company to turn over documents related to how it screens tenants, its finances, how it handles maintenance and safety requests, and how it promotes its apartment to potential residents.
What they've done to combat that is file this legal action asking the court to step in and declare, are these requests reasonable?
CBZ Management claims the subpoenas are broad, burdensome, and lack reasonable cause.
I'm not aware of anything under the law that requires the Attorney General's office to set forth explicit information about what reasonable cause there is.
The company also argues the information in the investigation should be confidential for the safety of tenants, employees, and vendors.
I don't see any reason that the Attorney General's office would be required to accept a protective order.
The lawsuit asks the court to step in and limit the requests to only relevant information.
The parties receiving these requests are very specific to not say that these requests need to be quashed in their entirety.
In one of the motions, CBZ Management says they do want to cooperate with the Attorney General, but only if their terms are met. The attorney we spoke with said it is common practice for judges to reduce or restrict subpoenas, so we'll see how this plays out. Ria Jha, 9 News.
Fairly mild weather across the metro area today. Still a little windy out there. Kathy, we're talking about mid-December, though, and it sounds like the mild stuff's sticking around.
Yeah, another shift in the pattern, and that will allow for the wind to decrease tonight ahead of the next storm system. And ahead of the next storm system, the winds will be shifting out of the south, which will keep us relatively mild and dry here in Denver for several more days. It's a nice evening out there, good travel weather. You'll have no problems tomorrow morning. High clouds are spilling in ahead of Pacific storm system that will be here Thursday night into Friday. This will be a mountain snow producer. After topping out in the mid-50s today, we're down to 38 in Denver, 5 below in Gunnison, 15 above in Steamboat. And 24 hours ago, it was 23 degrees colder in Pueblo. It was 10 degrees colder in Colorado Springs. I mean, the 24-hour temperature swing with the wind shift has really been something. But the wind's not entirely calm. We're still seeing some gusts over 20 and 30 miles per hour around Nederland and Dumont, Loveland Pass, Kenosha Pass. And that's part of your weather headlines. Diminishing winds, but the next storm brings more snow, this time to the mountains. And it'll be light the way it appears, so I don't have any winter weather or travel advisories to tell you about yet. That could be changing. I'll talk about that and have your extended forecast in detail. That's coming up.
The last migrant shelter in Denver is now closed. The last of the families staying at Mullen Home in North Denver have moved out. At one point, 200 people were staying there. The closure of Mullen House marks the end of 2 years of city-run shelters since the migrant crisis began in December of 2022. An advocate for immigrants who's placed many families in shelters over the last 2 years says now's the right time. There's less need and less funding.
Walking in today was like a little bit of sadness because we miss the people and the family, but really, really happy because it means that families have found their place, have found a home.
The past 2 years, city leaders estimate 30,000 migrants accepted at least one night of shelter at some point.
A policy that prevents ICE agents from arresting people at churches, schools, and hospitals is expected to change. Sources tell 9 News that NBC News, President-elect Donald Trump plans to scrap it on his first day in office. The policy was put in place in 2011. It is meant to help avoid alarm in public places. There are certain circumstances when arrests, interviews, and searches are allowed in those so-called sensitive spaces. If there's a national security or terror issue, if they're trying to arrest a felon considered dangerous, if there's imminent risk of death or physical harm, or concern that evidence could be destroyed. And even under those circumstances, agents do have to get approval from their supervisors. A policy change could mean that we would never see a time when people seeking deportation protection could stay in sensitive places like churches.
Democratic Congressman Jason Crow says he will resist if the incoming Trump administration starts rounding up law-abiding families for deportation. But it's not clear if Crow and other Democrats have any power to stop the mass deportation that Trump says will begin in Crow's district in Aurora.
They're going to round up families, they're going to round up law-abiding people in our community, children, people paying taxes, people owning businesses, people working in our community, and en masse deport them. That would gut our economy, that would gut our communities, and frankly, deporting American children, even children who are citizens of the country, is immoral, and I will not stand for it. So you can count on me to resist that if that's what they end up doing.
When you say resist, what does that practically mean?
Well, as a member of Congress, we have the power of the purse. That's our preeminent authority. Now we're in the minority, so there are limits to that, but there are still ways to use that power of appropriation, the power of the purse, to restrict what people can do.
Crow also said Congress could use its oversight authority to make sure that any mass deportation follows the law. You can see my full conversation with Representative Crow, where we also discuss his leading of the investigation into assassination attempts against Donald Trump, as well as his opposition to President Biden's pardon of his son. You see that on the next YouTube channel.
Kroger and Albertsons are going through a bitter breakup. Albertsons backed out of the proposed $24 billion merger and sued Kroger today. They're seeking a $600 million termination fee, along with billions in lost legal fees and lost shareholder value. Kroger calls the claims baseless and says Albertsons is not entitled to that fee. The big development happened a day after 2 judges halted the proposed merger in separate court cases, agreeing that it would narrow competition and hurt consumers. High school students in Douglas County will be able to take an AP African American Studies course. The Board of Education unanimously approved that elective late last night. It happened 3 weeks after they delayed a vote because of pushback from some parents questioning its content. The course will start being offered in the fall.
A group wants to make sure that the victims of one of Colorado's deadliest plane crashes are not forgotten. They're planning a memorial to go in 7 decades after the crash. 44 people died when United Airlines Flight 629 went down in a field in Weld County. This was November of 1955. The FBI says a man blew up that plane with his mother aboard to collect insurance money. The plane had just taken off from Stapleton Field in Denver. The control tower is the only remaining structure from the old Stapleton. It's now home to Flight Co. Brewing, and that's where the memorial will go up next year.
What our hope is that this memorial will be a gift from the citizens of Colorado to the families to acknowledge their pain.
There's a separate memorial in the works for the crash site. The group putting that together expected to be done by 2026.
A gas leak in Lone Tree that forced businesses to evacuate is now fixed. South Metro Fire says a driver hit a gas meter on Park Meadows Drive about 1.5 miles west of the mall just before 4 this afternoon. It took a bit, but Excel crews eventually shut the line off, and first responders helped air out surrounding buildings where that gas smell was pretty strong.